Are we live yet?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our pre-match press conference to preview our game against Newcastle, and we'll start off with Vinny at Scout, please.
We'll start with team news, please, Frank. Mason Holgate, Yerry Mina, are they ready to be involved yet at all?
Yerry had a small issue in his rehab last week, so he won't be. Mason is in the squad, so yeah. Progressing with that. Ben Godfrey's also on the training pitch, which is great to see. Early stages, but good to see.
Every week we seem to ask you this, but Dominic Calvert Lewin, is it still a case of being careful with his minutes, or do you think you can let him go from the start now?
Well, yeah, a bit of both, because I referenced it, as you say, you ask me every week, and I referenced it the last time you asked me in terms of we've got to be careful with Dominic coming back in terms of probably the training, making sure that we sort of gradually bring him in, but as quick as possible. It's a fine balance, that one. But yeah, he's certainly getting to the stage when you think that we've got 2 games in 3 days now coming up, that hopefully we can get more minutes out of him.
Is it a fine balance for him himself as well, because he's got that motivation to make the England World Cup squad. He sees the kind of momentum building and people talking about Ivan Toney at the moment as well. And if he is getting game time with you regularly and he's shown his top form, then that's obviously great for you, because of his motivation as well, wanting to get into that England World Cup squad.
Yeah, it's human nature, and I think it's the natural mentality of top level players. They want to play for their countries, but the rules are, the first thing is you play well for your club to get there, and because of Dominic's injuries, that's probably put him in this position. My feeling is, because I work closely with him, if he would be fit and playing regularly, then he'd be making a great case, of course. So it's step by step for us at the minute. Dominic is an England squad player. He's been in that squad many a time and played. So can we get him fit, get him on the pitch for us first? Great. Hopefully see what he can deliver for us, and then of course he gets himself into that question.
Do you feel there's still time for him then?
I don't know.
It's difficult though, isn't it? I mean, with it being so tight.
Sure, and it's not my decision, is it? My focus is purely on getting Dominic in the best condition and obviously playing well for us.
Any further thoughts on the penalty from Sunday? Because obviously we heard the view that Harry Kane initiated the contact, so there's been 2 sides to it. What's your view now that you've been able to see it back?
I thought it was smart play from Harry. It was a mistake from us, and Jurgen saved us many a time, and he's a high level goalkeeper, top bracket in the world for me. So that outside, because of what he's done for us, I think Harry was smart, and that's not a criticism either. I think that's football sometimes, when good players know when contact's coming, and I think it probably was just about a penalty when I look at it with as neutral an eye as I can have.
Do you even have to speak to Jurgen after something like that, because his standards have been so high for you in your time here?
No, I don't, because I know his training levels, I know his mentality, I know what he puts on himself, and the goalkeeper is the one position in the team where you hold that responsibility. It's difficult because the smallest of errors can be critical in a game. But as I say, I just reflect on what he's done for us many a time, and I know how he'll be feeling about it, so it's not one to broach at all.
You said after the game against Spurs, it's where we are. I mean, what have the last 2 games really told you about where you are as a squad, and what further steps you need to take?
Well, every game tells you something, and particularly when you're in the early stages of building. But we are clearly, the players who brought in that have gone straight into the team. The midfield is new. Sometimes at times the front line has looked new with Neil Maupay and Dwight McNeil, for instance, and young fullbacks, and so there's a lot of things that are coming together naturally for us. So you learn as much from a good performance against West Ham at home, or a resilient performance against Southampton, a good spirited fight back against Manchester United, but mistakes we made in the first half. All these things I think are very much part of our process. We've seen it many a times around. It's important for me, as the first person who's working here, is to just be very sort of balanced about it. And we knew we were coming into a tough run of games: Manchester United, Tottenham away, Newcastle away. So it's how can we apply ourselves best? And against Tottenham, we did a lot. The game plan, the tactical nature of the team was spot on until they get that goal and change the face of the game. So they were good and they were bad, and we just have to keep working on those.
We've spoken a lot about leaders, obviously Cody and Tarkowski and their experience, but someone like Onana appears to be a leader as well. He seems to be having that influence in the dressing room. Did you expect that necessarily from someone so young coming into a new league?
Yeah, I did expect it, because from my early conversations with him, it was clear he had a big personality and was a very driven young man. And I've played alongside, worked with those type of players before. The reality is at 21, I was a Chelsea, I think Kevin De Bruyne was maybe 20, 21. I'm picking Belgian players because it's a clear relation to Amadou, but Romelu Lukaku was of a similar age. And then you look at what those two have done in their careers. I hope and I feel that Amadou will have his version of that. But what I'm trying to get at is there'll be things that he can learn about how he sort of really directs all of that personality and talent that he has. And that's probably my job to work closely with him. But what we've seen on the pitch so far, hopefully for me, is just a start, because I've got a huge amount of belief in him, and I'll try and help him in how he takes that forward.
So he was a bit more outgoing than someone like Kevin De Bruyne, the way he reacts to the crowd at Goodison. Yeah,
and as I say, every personality is different, but I remember Kevin, to be fair, Kevin is one of the best players in the world. But in his early stages, he wasn't getting in the team at Chelsea, and you see little reactions from him. I remember my reactions at different times in my career, so it's my job as being slightly more experienced is to sort of understand the different personalities. But mainly, hone them in the right way in terms of, your professionalism, your drive, how you affect teammates, and then try and obviously help with the talent. But, he's a really talented boy. We're delighted to have him here, and I think he showed some big glimpses of that against Tottenham. But as I say, I think there's a lot more to come. Very pleased that we've got him.
And he's got the mentality to deal with something like that. When you can recognise the talent, to say that you could see him becoming something like a Kevin De Bruyne, you hope that he becomes.
Yeah, and again, I'm not directly comparing. Clearly, those two are very different players. But he's in the Belgium squad now. He's coming and playing in the Premier League, and I think we should never take that lightly, the difference of coming from, as a young player, from a different league into the fastest, most physical league in the world. There'll be moments that will catch anybody, let alone a younger player who's finding his feet. So I think we applaud that, but that's the reason for optimism in terms of what he can give, because he's adapting at the moment, but he's already being a very important player for us.
Newcastle, just one defeat, 3 Premier League wins. Obviously, also had that 3-3 with City as well. I mean, how do you view this Newcastle team? Because it seems that they're more than just difficult to beat, aren't they?
Oh yeah, of course you have to respect them, because they're a really good team. They've got fantastic manager, coach, staff, a lot of detail. I'm sure, just from the outside. Really good players. Recruited really well in the last 2 windows, and of course the new funds they have, I think they want to direct it well. They've brought in a great director of football. So there feels like there's a real plan and a vision to what they're doing, and we have to respect that and understand we're in for a very tough match, because they're a good team on all levels.
Contrasting games last season, wasn't it? Obviously, all there compared to the night at Goodison where Alex Iwobi scored so late on for you.
Yeah, and a bit like people ask me about Tottenham, it's so different. We're different this year. They're different. They maybe feel like they've moved on steps. We feel like we've moved on steps. Last year we went there, and it was difficult for us, and we didn't really have impact in the game, and we had a few of those away from home where we didn't have maybe energy, legs, personality to not dominate games, but really contesting games. We're showing much better signs of that, so hopefully we can continue with that. Thank you.
Frank, when you look at Newcastle and the trajectory they've been on over the last 11 months now with Eddie Howe in charge, do you see parallels between the assignment you've picked up here and what he's been able to achieve up there?
Not quite. It's a different situation. As I say, it's not, and this is not for me to focus on Eddie's situation, because I don't know. When you do this job, you realise there are a million things you don't know from the outside. But what is clear is their situation, and probably things that have happened with us, with coming in and the squad and really fighting off relegation, Richarlison leaving, trying to rebuild in different ways. It's different situations completely, but as us as coaches, we're working just to try and get improvement. That's all you can do every day.
I mean, one of the first few games, I think I'm right in saying, you had in charge was away at Newcastle, wasn't it? Which was an eventful game in itself. How far has this group now come from where they were that night to where you're trying to get to now?
Well, we've come a bit of a distance. It's really hard to, put it on the scale, because where do we want to get to? Of course, everybody wants to go into Europe and go contest for cup competitions, but at the moment we know that we're more focused on the here and now, because the next game's always the most important one, and we know there's a lot of improvements to be had because the team is pretty new still in lots of players. I've said that before. So I think we've come steps in a forward direction, but there's never a time for complacency. There's a long way and a lot of work to do.
And Vinny spoke about Newcastle's record, only 1 defeat this season, 6 draws along the way there. If you're trying to chart progression, is that it? Showing a bit more resilience, digging out points when previously you might not have done?
Yeah, and we've done that this year, to be fair, as Newcastle are doing there. You become more robust as you improve, I think. And there's always balance of recruitment and work on the training pitch, and we've both had our different versions of that, and Newcastle are a robust, hard-working, physical team as well as quality. and I always admire that in a team when they have those attributes. So we feel that we have those as well, but we're probably, we know we're steps behind in terms of the of where Newcastle are and where we are, because we just know where we're at. You can feel it in the club, but there is a level of optimism around, because I think people see little shoots of improvement. But our job, as I say, I keep saying the same thing, is to just keep working. And with this game, it's just a very tough match in front of us. Very tough match, a tough crowd, an evening game. There is always going to be a big atmosphere, so let's show some personality there.
And I suppose it's epitomised in the league table for all that everyone talks about Newcastle's progression. If you were to win this game, you'd only be 2 points behind them in the league.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing about looking at the league this time of year, because it's so close that we've been through a couple of tough games there and we don't get the results we want. And from everyone getting excited, people go, "Oh, that looks different." So I wouldn't put too much on that at the minute. We certainly have to have a bit of a longer term view and purely focus on what we can do, which is look at our own performance and kind of try and push the table to the side a little bit. We had enough table watching last year to last us a lifetime in the last few months, looking at results, looking where we are, and it was desperate. At the minute, if we can just focus on what we can control and work, then hopefully we won't have that sort of desperation in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. We'll go to Ian Kennedy at Radio Merseyside.
Hi, Frank. As someone who scored a lot of goals from midfield yourself, to what extent do you try and instill into your midfield players the mentality of trying to get forward and to be brave to go forward and try and score goals, particularly when obviously Calvert, Lewin's been and Richarlison have been unable to be part of it this season for different reasons? Yeah,
I think there are team issues with that one. Firstly, midfield has to be aware of the structure of the team. So it's all well and good to talk about getting forward, but we have to be secure at all times. At times last season we were too easy to play through. There were different factors to that, but to keep a bit of security. But now when you look at the players, the first thing you want as a coach is to see they've got the capacity to get there. And our players now, we do have capacity in midfield to arrive. Then the next thing is, okay, the quality of the finish, the clinical, the mentality. And if I'm honest, it takes hours and hours and hours on the training ground at that point. It doesn't. My first-hand experience of it was I worked hard and it made me score goals. I've repeated and repeated and repeated from being 10 years old to 38 years old when I finished. So I can pass that on to the players, and then hopefully we'll see the results. It's not always that simple.
And you mentioned that optimism there. Is that still there? You had a lot of momentum going into the United game, couple of defeats now. How fragile can that confidence idea be, and do you have to kind of keep everyone lifted, or are they still at that point where they have got that confidence?
We're stronger than what we were last year for obvious reasons, because the club were tense. We were. It was that situation. Now we're different, and I don't think anybody expected this to be a straight line in a positive direction. It's the Premier League. Not many have that, other than the absolute top boys anyway. So we have to support each other in that sense. I support the players. The players have to be robust. They have to keep their confidence. They have to understand when there are in-game things that we can do a lot better, and that's to find balance and keep working. And at the moment, I think with the feeling we have, I don't feel like we've been too disrupted by 2 defeats, because people respect the teams that beat us for starters. But behind closed doors, can we analyse them and be better? For sure. So, I'm not saying we're not concerned. It's the Premier League. It tests you all the time, but we have to have a belief in ourselves that we are in a decent position and there's work to do.
Thanks, Ian. We'll go to Alistair at the BBC.
Hi, Frank. You mentioned there before about Newcastle and sort of obviously on a different journey from you, and obviously the money that they have. Do you think it's fair that they've got resources where they can call on a sovereign wealth fund to help their development?
I think in modern football everyone has a different position, a different perspective, and sometimes it changes. Sometimes I think it's a reason that we embrace and love the Premier League. I lived the Chelsea story as a player. I viewed it and touched on it as a Manchester City player for a year. And there are, I think, a lot of stories within there in a football level purely that you can just embrace and love about. I saw City got voted the Club of the Year last night for the many, many good things I know they do on and off the pitch. So everybody's different, and this thing of financial fair play for me is a bit strange. I never kind of understand it, because if it was financially fair, there are a lot of teams that have a lot more income than we do, for instance, and can spend a lot more on players and wages, and that's the story of the modern game. So it's all relative. That's where I stand on that one.
Yeah, but I think Jurgen Klopp's talking about Manchester City, since you bring it up. saying you can't really compete with a Manchester City or a Newcastle because they've just got the.
Yeah, but Liverpool have competed with them. Liverpool have competed with them with great coaching and great players and great recruitment. They brought in Virgil van Dijk and Alisson and all these players, and whilst being strong, they can keep re-strengthening and changing and all those things. So I think maybe you view it at this moment in time with Liverpool, with the form they've had, they're clearly going to be back up amongst it. So I think, as I say, I understand what he's saying to a degree. I can probably say the same when I'm talking about Newcastle. We're not there because they can spend 200 million in 2 windows, and we can't. We have to. Our net spend is much less. So you just get on with what you work. I think if that's his point, I completely get it. But in terms of trying to, I think the debate afterwards that's carried on is questioning whether it should be allowed or whatever, or these clubs are fighting on a different level. Maybe they are, but maybe that's just the Premier League and the way it is. And I don't think it's the worst thing. And as I say, I particularly look at the story I was involved in as a player and Manchester City, which I touched on, and particularly when I think about City in terms of how they handle themselves on and off the pitch. I think they're a fantastic example. That's my opinion. That's just where I'm at.
Yeah. Also, it was mentioned after the weekend there was a few incidents, obviously at Anfield, but I think with players surrounding referees in other games as well. The referee charity has talked about the conduct of managers and players, and obviously that filters down to grassroots level. I mean, all about the pressure of the sidelines as a manager. Can you sort of mitigate for how managers sort of can lose their temper so much, and how they can abuse almost referees as well, or how would you stand on the behaviour over the weekend?
Yeah, we have a responsibility. I understand that. But there's also a microscope on managers in the modern day where we're in highly pressurised jobs. And it's easy for me to sit here in a calm moment and say, we should be better and all these sort of things, but the amount of pressure we come under and sometimes decisions that go against you can throw you. I don't see at the top level. People talk about Jurgen Klopp the other day and Pep Guardiola, the 2 top managers, and I think he got a red card fine. I think Jurgen sort of said afterwards, maybe my reaction. We all know that situation. If you're trying to draw a line to that, to someone on a Sunday league game or something, going up and physically attacking a referee, then that's just a personal responsibility of that person that's gone and done that, as it would be if they went and did it on the street. So I don't draw that line. I understand our responsibility, but I don't draw the line directly from the height, because I don't see it much. I think I see managers in very high pressure situations handle themselves really, really well for 99.9%, and that little bit as well, that little percent that sometimes comes out, I think if controlled. I remember when Tuchel and Conte had this earlier in the season, and afterwards it was like, this is great, this is what the Premier League's all about, seeing passion and people show themselves. So I think we can't have everything in one go.
Do you feel like the nature of the Premier League at the minute, the amount of money that's involved, maybe the games, the run of fixtures, the pressure from the media spotlight as well. Do you feel like the pressure on managers has increased over the last few years? Yeah,
for sure. I think you see it every day. I think there's a fascination about who might get sacked next and all these things, and we have to feed the media train. I listened to it on the way into work this morning, talking about managers who are working in circumstances that nobody knows. Difficult circumstances, pressurised job, and people are casually talking about who will be sacked next, and I think that's where we're at, and it's a bit unfortunate. I'm not trying to change the world by saying it, it's just a reality of what we're in.
And that feeds into maybe a time where the pressure just gets too much on the sidelines potentially. Yeah,
maybe I don't know the direct relation to that. Everyone handles these things differently, but it's just a reality of the job. And I'm not complaining too much if people say you're well paid, you're in a great job, you should be proud to manage Everton Football Club. Absolutely, I am. You have to understand it comes with it. But sometimes the runaway of it, I think, is just a little bit much. Because, as I say, when you work in a job, you do understand there are a lot of things on the outside that are not seen, and very easy for say. Someone in the media to casually comment on things when you don't know quite about them, and I think that can run away of itself. But we do choose this job at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Alistair. We'll go to Carl Markham at the Press Association.
Hi, Frank. Just one on Jordan, please. Going to Newcastle as a former Sunderland player, he often is the target. Well, he is a target for quite a lot of abuse and such from the fans. And he has in the past admitted that atmosphere sometimes got to him, but he's also then spoken subsequently about working on his focus and his concentration. I'm just wondering, you've worked with him now for 10 months. what can you say about that side of his game? Because we can all see the quality he has in terms of his goalkeeping on the pitch, but he specifically has spoken about his focus and his concentration.
He's just a really mature man for me, and maybe he has matured. I didn't know him well before I got here, so it's hard to maybe see what that development is. But what I see and what people tell me, work closely with him, is his maturity, and it's more than normal for a young player to go to a place where you get stick or criticism from because he's a Sunderland boy in their low to mid-20s to be affected by it. It's very natural. I actually experience similar, and as you get a bit older, you mature, you understand it, and then you actually end up performing better because you don't put the pressure on yourself. So I think probably Jordan has gone through, or is going through that process, and it's more than normal.
Thanks, Carl. Any further questions in the open section before we move on? No? Okay.